actually. Rich, did you hear me? Okay. All right. Well, in that case, I'll just talk. Okay.
I absolutely did hear you.
Okay, got it.
But for some reason, I'm getting a mixed signal here.
Hopefully not from me. No. All right. Well, I'm just going to go on because slides are visual enhancement, but I don't want to waste our time. Educate Maine is a really cool organization. We are funded by large and small businesses who really want to help students find their way to those jobs, but not everybody. The students who are most passionate or interested in that particular way based on their personality and their work preferences. So the program I'm involved with is Project Login, which is focused primarily on students who are sparked by technology, digital technology, computing, IT, but also like data analysis across every industry, so health informatics and others too. So it was working great before.
Did not go to sleep.
No?
You keep talking, I'll keep working.
All right. Well, I'm just going to briefly mention some of the things that have happened over the past 20 years that are bringing a huge number of students who are experienced and used to competency-based learning to your classrooms. Because this is a movement that's national and global. Maine's ahead of the curve. A lot of schools are already doing it. And you may know about some of these things, but I just wanted to mention a few because they'll help you get a sense of where they're coming from. How many of you have heard of the Maine Learning Results? And the guiding principles from the Maine Learning Results. So as you know, our business leaders are as interested in those soft skills and the guiding principles as they are in the hard skills, that they both go together really well. So I think that that's a really important thing to be aware of. The other thing is, as was mentioned earlier, we have a great platform and infrastructure around the state in schools, but not so much in homes. And so we have students who are accustomed to using digital technologies in schools, but not so many that not as many have those same experiences at home. Broadband, laptop program. How many of you knew that the laptop program that was initiated with during Governor King's time was actually initiated or was inspired by the co-founder of the MIT Media Lab, and that he's the same person that also created Mindstorms and the idea of using Lego and building knowledge, which is really what competencies are about. And so Senator King is really interested now in how we encourage competency learning based on students' interests early on. And so we're doing a lot of work with kindergarten through middle school to start kids thinking about not only I'm interested in this, no matter what it is. Could be something academic, it could be robotics, it could be something else, but start hearing their voice, because by the time they get to middle school and or high school, it really benefits them to have had a sense of knowing that whatever they're excited about, it can be aligned to whatever curriculum that you want. And learner-centered education is really at the heart of LD 1422, competency-based bill that is in discussion again at the legislative level this very week. I don't think how many of you have worked with high school students and have worked on enrichment programs outside of school? I'd love to know which ones you were interested in and also the students were interested in. So Lee.
Well, I taught middle and high school 14 years. So I worked with the laptop program.
Yeah.
I work with gifted and talented at Presque Isle.
Oh,
That's great.
I don't know what you were looking for specific.
I just was curious about the kinds of things that struck you as being memorable about your time working with high school students. And I think that's,
I love technology. Master's degree in instructional technology, so being able to use software,
nice
computer, and simulations are
excellent.
Very heavy into my career.
Well, I have a few things for you in a minute then.
Okay.
Did you have your hand up too, or high school or earlier enrichment or learning?
And yes, I've taught middle school, high school, and also the enrichment I've done gifted and talented, and it was really funny when you mentioned Seymour Pappert's work, because I had a group of students who I can't remember, I think they were 7th grade, they may have been the 8th grade G&T class, where the guidance counselor came walking down the hall and gave us a very stern look because we were playing in the class. they had this little robot, and I waved him in, and a student was giving a presentation on a robot. Two of them had worked together on building this robot, and they used Logo, the programming language from Mindstorm Seymour Papert, to control this robot. And just the look on the guidance counselor's face when he realized we weren't playing games in class, that this was actually a project that these students had done that was incredible. But
exactly. Well, and so the question really is how to start with that excitement, and how, without killing the excitement, start aligning that to more rigorous, sort of aligned, oriented learning outcomes or learning desired targets. And we actually have this up behind me now. I don't need to be in front of it. I'll give you an example right now that is happening around the state, which is really exciting. So robotics was really big. And robotics was known to draw students into the engineering programs at the University of Maine, like mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, because there's a lot of building and wiring, but not as many to computer engineering. And what's interesting is Scratch and some of the other block programming languages actually have a better alignment. And at some schools, they're using it to teach freshman college computer science courses because it's about the logic. So like in educational technology, or even using technology every day, the first thing you need to do is ask the questions to figure out what you want to accomplish, and you break it down into how do I figure it out, what tasks, right, into specific steps. Then you go through and test them. Sometimes you have some bugs and you go back and something didn't work, just like just now, he demonstrated it. Those are very much, those kinds of activities spark kids who are really well matched for these kinds of careers, but there's almost no experience in school. So right now, a group of high school students for the last 2 years, some of whom have graduated and they're students at the University of Maine at Augusta, have been doing game development. And they do it, they're doing it for the Discovery Museum in Bangor. They actually are using this platform, which is the largest game development platform in the world, and game development is the largest entertainment medium in the world, larger than movies. And they're making STEM games for students at the Discovery Museum to learn STEM concepts. They're working with 4-H to take their STEM toolkits that go around the state and have games that go with them. But they're using this platform called Unity, which starts out drag and drop like Scratch. And in the end, you can use C# to program the most complex games in the world. So these kids are now running this club on their own. It is now a going concern. They are offering summer camps this summer in Bangor, which are now full. And they now we're about to roll it out statewide in terms of coaching for kids in after-school programs. So again, then the next step is Thomas College is working on a competition called the Thomas Cup in October, which starts out with 4 hours of 10 high school teams coming together to play games. And then those games start having tasks and they start having more structure. And by the end of this 9 hours into like 2 in the morning for high school students, they actually have mastered the first 3 or 4 weeks of a computer science program in college. And they already know most of the stuff. So it's kind of more like prior learning assessment because they're actually looking at what they know and they're helping each other. So this is kind of the process that we're trying to encourage, which is how do we connect between the two? And I mentioned the proficiency-based diploma. A brief bit about Project Login. So about 4 years ago, a number of employers said we just don't have enough people who are in Maine, students in Maine, who want to apply for these jobs. And we know part of it is they just don't know about the jobs. And part of it is there's no real clear pathways, or I call them stepping stones, to get the kinds of learning experiences that will prepare them for those jobs. So we started with 7 sponsors, the Chancellor of the University System, and we've now added more businesses than these and Thomas Husson. And the idea is how do we all work together to help kids learn about, aspire to, and find out if they're matched for a career, and what are the steps, the paths from here to there. So our mission is to help expand the network of people in this field in Maine. And our short-term goal has been to help students at the University of Maine system who are in these degree programs succeed, because it has one of the poorest retention rates of all programs. And the reason is maybe not what you would think. Parents say, oh my God, computing and IT, they're the highest paid jobs, they're high demand, I need to go study this. And they get in there and they get into their first semester, and It's nothing of what they expected. They thought it'd be like Facebook, and they're not prepared for it. They haven't had the chance to have either that informational interview or that insight into what it's really like when they were in middle school or high school. So it's really a question of helping students make sure they're well matched, but then supporting them through experience through their college programs. So we do things, we work with all of these campuses individually and with the faculty. We found something interesting, and I worked in higher education online communications before. If you're a person who's interested in a particular area or profession, and you go to a college website, you have to go one place to learn about the major, you have to go another place to learn about admissions, you have to go another place to learn about financial aid, you have to go another place to learn about internships. So one of the things that we've been doing is starting to make up dashboards that pull all that information into one place so that the parents, the counselors, the teachers, and the students themselves can find out some sort of short information about all the programs and then link off to the deep locations within the college website. So we're starting with a profession. We're not starting with just ending with a degree. We're starting with what's the ultimate way that you thrive as a person in Maine in your work and personal life, and then work back from there. So we do this for each of our campuses. We do networking receptions, which are not like campus fairs. We try to have a 2-to-1 ratio so that each student who's there gets 10 or 15 minutes with each recruiter. So it's a very high number of business representatives, but what's really interesting is they're not only there just to find good students, although a lot of them offer paid internships right on the spot. They know they're there also to provide coaching and professionalism skills and interviewing and asking questions and answering. You might, I don't know if you've heard of this before, but a couple of years ago, Google used to do its recruiting by giving you this logic test that was like 2 hours long and incredibly difficult. You had to be a PhD. Their new HR vice president looked at that and said, well, that isn't actually a good correlation to a successful employee. So Google has switched over to 5 20-minute interviews. And that is far more successful because they get an idea of the whole person, how they interact, how they ask questions. They start asking them about what they've done, what they're excited about, and passion and enthusiasm, in other words, engagement because they're interested, is one of the most important factors. So in working with high school and college students, you're starting out and wanting to find out what they're excited about and align it. So these are a great opportunity. 30 Maine employers are offering 140 paid internships at $16 an hour average up to $22 an hour, and all of them are considering them they're the new entry-level job. And they're wanting to hire freshmen and sophomores. MMG up in Presque Isle, they hire freshmen in college. They've had a 4-year internship program, and all of them that stayed in school, they've hired. With all of our internship programs, 75 to 85% are hired for continuing work because it is not just go get coffee. This is a real job, and they work hard to make sure that they find the right people for that. And I mentioned briefly the internship inventory. Another thing that our employers are doing, which is interesting, they're moving away from job descriptions. They are now putting their personal email addresses up as a contact, and they're saying the student that is interested in general in my business and in general areas of work, and we kind of identify it by whether it's development or analysis or networking, we want them to reach out to us because the number one thing is their motivation, their initiative, and they guarantee they will respond to every person that reaches out to them within a day. So we are moving away from specific job descriptions and moving more toward encouraging student initiative, which is different. And part of it is because the old job those online job systems, there were so many false negatives. A student might be 1/10 of 1 point under in a GPA, or they might not be in exactly the right major, and it turns out that those automatically would filter out good candidates. And instead, Unum is hiring analysts who are majors in anthropology, linguistics, music, foreign language, because they're looking for people who have the ability to translate between symbol systems. Translate between user needs and the techie information they need, which is much more deliberate. So they're not as interested in the major, they're more interested in who they are and what their competencies are. And these are all really big changes. So even if all the colleges in Maine doubled or tripled the number of students graduating in these and other majors, it still doesn't come close to the demand. So computing and IT is across every industry. It's just the demand is so huge. So early on, our program recognized that that wasn't enough to meet the needs. So we're really working hard to reach out to K-12 and adult learners now, which we were doing before. But so right now, we're working hard at starting with what in elementary school is an appropriate learning opportunity to get excited about this, middle school, high school, and all types of adult learners. And the irony is, in Maine, even though we have this amazing technology, Seymour Papert inspired the laptop program, almost very few classes are teaching these skills. And I don't just mean like coding skills like where does the curly bracket go? I'm talking about those computational thinking skills. Just how do you use computers to solve problems? How do you use logic? How do you understand problems? Even that broader level. And then these don't count as graduation requirements. So they don't count toward math or count toward science. They're electives. And one of the biggest challenges is students don't often have anybody in their life who works in these jobs. So how can you aspire to something you've never seen before? And there's stereotypes out there. On the one hand, you've got the Facebook drop out of Harvard to make $1 billion. And on the other hand, has anybody seen the BBC IT Crowd TV series? They're all in the basement, they're pasty-faced, they're just like asocial. Neither of those stereotypes are at all true. If you walk into IDEX's new LEED certified global headquarters, it's so collaborative, and the space it's like play and collaboration and fun, and so it's a very different environment, and people just don't know about it. So as I mentioned before, we really start with engagement. How do you find what that spark is, and then translate that and transform it into what's relevant? So we realized these are similar whether you are an 8-year-old or a 30-year-old who's thinking of changing from an English major to this field. So we've started building this engagement model, which is not just like pipeline and not just pathways, but stepping stones. What are the things that would help you if you're still engaged to move more deeper, get into deeper learning? So at the beginning, what are the things that you can do to just simply find out what this is all about? How many of you have heard of Hour of Code? Apple, Google, Microsoft, the Department of Defense, the White House, and other boys and girls clubs started this thing called code.org. It is actually the largest membership, it's the fastest growing membership website in the history of the internet, period. It started 3 years ago. They had a program called An Hour of Code. 150 million people did it, and it is just games. But they're games that teach you about logic and repeats. So Hour of Code, we do a digital festival with kids from kindergarten to grandparents, and they all love it. So that's the kind of thing that we share with people. It now is a full computer science curriculum from K through 12. And this is what we're suggesting even to admissions people who are looking at admitting computer science students. It's not just enough to look and see that you have 4 years of math. What is it? Who are you? What are you excited about? So this might be a way of helping find out what they're excited about. And I'll skip through these. These are all on our website, but Scratch is a really great tool. Khan Academy has great materials. Code Academy is a free interactive tutorial. All these are free because businesses really want kids to find their way, and people who might be underemployed or returning veterans to find their way if this is right for them. edX has free classes from Harvard and MIT. You can now get certificates from those, which are great introductory courses in computer science. There's all kinds of non-computing activities. So all these are building competency a little bit more at a time, no matter what age you are. And Coder Dojo is a global club for kids who are wanting to build apps and games on their own. They have all kinds of tutorials. And then there are app challenges around the country which are all about making an app that helps somebody in your community. And there are teams in Maine that have done this, and they work with college and adult mentors. So what's really interesting about all this is that it's across boundaries. None of these are only kids. In the school that I've been volunteering in, we brought in the gold standard, 10 dads. as volunteers every single Friday morning to do a coding club that was also had Lego kids could play with, also had Scratch. It was basically an education arcade where kids could do what they were excited about and have adults support them and follow their lead and ask questions. Kind of like inquiry-based learning. Hey, what are you doing? That's cool. What made you decide to do that? Huh. I don't want to use up too much time, but there were 2 girls in the Lego club who were sitting next to each other, and they each built houses. And I said, well, this is great. Are you working together? And they said, yes. I said, but it looks like you have 2 houses. And they said, wait a minute. And they took their 2 houses and they pushed them together, and all the doors and windows lined up. They were making 2 halves of a house. So by asking that question, are you doing something collaborative, I get a chance to really find out that that was a soft skill, a guiding principle that they were working on. So we also support curriculum. So as students get deeper and they've got more excited, there's now open source curriculum for middle and high schools. There's a new advanced placement course. We're supporting all of the college programs here and helping students understand the differences between them, because the UMA CIS degree is totally different from the UMO computer engineering degree. And it's great that as all of our faculty are getting together and starting to recognize they have kind of cultural niches, they have more interest in research or more interested in business analysis, that's valuable to communicate amongst each other, because there's the opportunity to direct a student toward one program or the other based on what their particular interests are, but also promoting to the public. And that's a newer thing, because they used to think they were all in competition. But actually it's evolving very quickly. So then I'm going to say something that's very interesting that might be useful for you. One of the things that teachers and actually also college faculty are always asking is, well, how do I figure out where to have a kid do an informational interview? So you've got somebody who's really, you can tell they are well matched for medical records or for something else. And I don't know if you know this, but LinkedIn, within 6 months, has added a free open portal for alums from every single college and university in the United States, which means that you can go, select the university, select where they live now, what they studied, what their skills are, and it's all open. And what's interesting about that is our high school counselors are using that to find out who went to the community college or university near us and majored in a particular field, who is connected through somebody I know, and can I reach out and just simply say, would you be willing to do a 15-minute Skype with a couple of students? And it's a lot easier than the heavy lifting to actually get a student out to the job place and do like a really heavy-duty job shadow. That's also really good for faculty knowing where their alumni are, because some UMS campuses don't actually know. It's not a high priority. In the computing and IT profession, the Maine Department of Labor sees that there's about 14,000 people in the workforce in this profession. 8,000 of them are on LinkedIn. So it's not perfect, but it is a really good sampling. So in terms of informational interviews and job shadows, and also just understanding where your faculty, where your students are, this is a really great tool. It's free. All you need to do is linkedin.com/alumni. Real world projects are valuable. I won't mention anything about that. Paid internships are, according to the Gallup survey, the #3 reason that affect a person's entire well-being as a college graduate. I don't want to understate this or overstate it. Gallup did a survey of 50,000 college graduates. Each year they're increasing it so that they will be able to report on the thriving and well-being of college graduates at every single campus in the United States. This is a very big survey done with Purdue. They started with, tell me about your well-being. How good do you feel about you have enough money to live, that you have a good social environment, that you have community connections? They've broken that up. Then they went back and said, in your college experience, what were the factors that most contributed? And the number 1, 2, and 3, faculty that cared about me, or a mentor, or a concierge, or a steward, somebody who was there and over time, career counselor, anybody, over multiple semesters. Second one was applied experience, paid internships. Third was a project they worked on no matter what for more than a semester so that they could have a sense of persistence. So what's really interesting about this is real-world experiences, practica that you're doing in a real-world environment or projects, and paid internships are considered the highest correlation. Academic success, specifically meaning grades, and a couple of other factors were like 5th and 9th. So it's how you use what you learned in the class, and you all know this, so I'm speaking to the choir. All of these things I've talked about are valuable for people who are going into this profession, but they're valuable for everybody, because the idea, we now all know how to do desktop publishing. We all know a bit about web publishing. You can think back not too many years when those things were completely like tech guru things you wouldn't touch. Programming, scripting, the ability to actually add logic into things you're doing on the computer. It's getting to be so easy that within a couple of years, that will be the same as making a flyer for your program. So these are valuable for all careers, but then also to computing. And so then the question is, okay, well, what do I need to do to encourage a student or to help a student gain the competencies to go into the profession itself? We got turned on to the U.S. Department of Labor competency model, which if you haven't used it yet, this is national surveys around what kinds of skills, capacities, competencies are aligned to all of 800 job categories. And if you use ONET, this is part of the ONET system. So it's basically a pyramid, and that pyramid at the top starts with what are the career-specific things that you need to know, and works down through the foundational things that everybody needs to know. So we've taken the ONET careers and broken them down into 5 categories based on the Holland code. So who has used Strong or Holland in your work? These are basically personality work style survey that helps you identify whether you're a person that prefers, for instance, to sit quietly and do accurate work and deliver it and take the next thing on. Or, like me, more expressive and getting into things, more analytical and investigative, that I just want to keep digging until I find the solution to that problem, or just helping people. And although they're very, very general categories, it's a system that's been around for a long time. So we've taken all of the careers in our area and broken it down that way into those kinds of categories with language around the person and their interests and what they like doing and how it connects to the competencies. So again, we're trying to look at that whole pathway of deepening engagement. And so on our website, which is projectlogin.com, we ask a lot of those questions. What do you like to do? Do you like to build things? Do you like to help people do things well? And then as you click on each one of them, you go into a little bit more detail, and I'll give you an example. Thinkers, investigative type, I want to get to the bottom of this, I'm going to do my study. It's jobs and analysis and security are the top jobs in Maine when you look at the factors of the number of jobs and the salary, the wages. So we actually go through and start asking questions. Unfortunately, it's a little small. And if a student is interested in this area, or a counselor, as you can see, we've taken and linked into a huge amount of information that's available from America's Jobs Network. And it's all really interesting. It's not dry. It's things like, for instance, I like to be dependable. I have a sense of integrity. This might not be language right now that kids are using, although we're working hard with middle school kids to consider those competencies, like hard skills. But in addition, US.jobs is a data mining service that pulls job listings from every single online network. It's the largest aggregation of all, and they've classified jobs according to these job groups. And so you can actually go in, if I'm interested in being a systems analyst and making 60 grand to start out of school, you can pick a zip code and say, where are those jobs within 10 miles of me? Also, what companies are hiring. So if I'm a counselor or I'm a parent, hey, what companies to reach out to see if there's opportunities for job shadow. All that information's there, and it's really a pretty smooth pathway. So we've actually worked hard to pull those together. And I'm just going to mention, in that competency model, it's a lot of kinds of competencies. The ones I just mentioned are like the hard skills that you think of all the time, like I need to know this radiological equipment, I need to know that. But underneath that, there are kind of broader skills for each industry. And underneath that, the academic practices that our high schools and junior highs are working on right now, which are, they're called Common Core. But when you look at the practices in all of those, so there's content, you need to know the number of light years to Alpha Centauri or how to use a polynomial. But in math, English, science, and social studies, there are competencies that are about using those approaches. So we actually have been supporting teachers to say, okay, it's good to know this scientific concept, but the scientific method, how to investigate, how to gather information, those are important no matter what job you're in. And then at the bottom, the coolest part of all is the soft skills. So at the foundation of all this, they're called different things in different models. 21st century skills is like business. Habits of mind is like K through 12 curriculum developers. The adult competencies are new ones from the PISA people. Employability standards, guiding principles from Maine, they're all really simple. They're not exactly correlated. The US Department of Labor defines these, but these are all pretty familiar. Our businesses say these are as important as your major, and they are more important than your GPA. We want a student who can think, who has general competency in the field, and we would rather train that person than the person who knows the details of how to use the equipment, but we have to train them how to be professional, how to show up on time, how to know how to work on a team. So we've been really interested in that. The main guiding principles are aligned to that, and they're now in law. So starting next year, high school students in Maine are having to demonstrate these in order to get a high school diploma, which means coming into the university's campuses will be students who have been thinking about and experiencing these competencies in a different way, which I think will really help us if we can really encourage middle school and high school teachers. We've also developed rubrics and scoring guides, so even an after-school program like robotics can look at a team and say, how well do they work together? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's intended to be simple. And again, Gallup, a student who has developed competency in these broader cross-cutting skills has a higher level of correlation with work quality later in life than their choice of major. And the Maine Development Foundation, every job is looking for these skills. And the National Association of American Colleges and Universities, I mentioned that before, the ability to think critically and communicate and solve problems is more important than the major. Developmental assets is from youth development. So what I've done is just quickly gone through some stepping stones to, in our particular profession, for getting toward competency and the stack of competencies. But the real question is, all right, how do you keep track of all this? I mean, I deliberately made this slide up to look really confusing. So I was logical at moving through these and describing them, and they're on our website. But when it comes down to it, there's a lot there. And our proxy for learning has been diplomas and credentials for 100 years. And they're a proxy for a whole bunch of competencies. So if you get a major in biology, it's intended to mean that it means something, or even a high school diploma. But what does it really mean? So we have been really excited for the last 2 years about the Global Open Badges Standard. So this is pretty interesting, and it's got real potential for competency learning in and out of school at all levels. And the idea is, it is a standard for a web page that, in essence, has a graphic that looks like a badge, just like we would all know from scouting. But underneath it, it includes all the learning targets and learning outcomes, the demonstration or evidence of mastery, like a link to a blog report or something else, and then a verification by somebody. So this badge, even though it sounds fun and cute, it actually can also represent a college degree, a certificate, a credential, an activity that a student did in their out-of-school job or project. And I'll just take another minute or two to show you how it works. So an institution or a program says, I want to create this. It's just a form. It goes into a web page. In essence, it's like a LinkedIn endorsement. It's just a very simple thing. It then is earned by a student or a learner, and it's verified that they have mastered those competencies, and then that digital standard can go on to social networks, LinkedIn, Facebook pages, into an e-portfolio, because this is a standard that, in essence, pares an e-portfolio down to a schema. So we've been trying to find portfolios for like 30 years. And what's interesting about this is it's globally adopted. It's 4 years old. It's a global World Wide Web standard. NASA uses it, the Smithsonian, colleges, UC Davis, their entire, three now of their entire degree programs is totally made up of hierarchical badges. And for PLA, it really helps. These people are working with CALE. So the idea is, in a prior learning assessment, the output can be all your regular documentation, but also this simple graphical representation that links you to, okay, you're a veteran, you worked in the IT department, you managed a $2 million operation with 20 employees. Here are the 30 things you knew. You don't have to take that class over again. So the PLA is actually also representable. So they've been doing this in cities around the country. It helped with summer melt. Students earned badges over the summer from their summer clubs and summer camps, and it actually kept them thinking, I'm learning, I'm learning. Learning is fun, and that's a very strong inducement. The thing that's coolest, the person that developed this standard grew up in Maine. She traveled all over the world, worked for Mozilla, worked for MacArthur Foundation. She moved back to Maine for reasons that we've heard before, to raise her family. As a young professional, she traveled, lived in different places. So she's back. She and we are working together on what's called Maine State of Learning, which is a badge network for Maine, because all these foundations are very interested in the fact that Maine has laptops and a pretty good school network library, school and library network. And so we're a founding partner along with Gulf of Maine Research Institute and a number of others. And the data piece that's interesting is the Gulf of Maine Research Institute says, wow, this is in place for 10 years. And you've got kids now that are in college, and you can look back and see all those different learning activities that they're really proud of, that they accomplished all the way back to when they were like in the 3rd grade. And you could see that, and you could look at that and see, hey, this person clearly has been interested in this, has been interested in science, or in writing and literature, or in community service. You have all those the aggregation of all those small competencies that help you know and help them know a little bit more. So there's two sides. One encourages learning, and the other side, potentially then, you can use that data set and look and see, well, this young professional, all these young professionals in this field, they all went to that particular summer camp, or they did that particular leadership program. So let's really see what the correlations are. So this is kind of the idea of the whole vision, sort of from curiosity to career, and how we capture the competencies that we learn at any age, in any occupation. A lobsterman needs to know business practices, needs to know technology, needs to have a deep knowledge of biology and science. How do we have all of those anytime, anywhere learning opportunities captured in a way so that people can also be proud of being lifelong learners, because lifelong learning doesn't mean going back to class over and over. It means that every day there's something new. So we don't want everybody, the program I'm in doesn't want everybody to go into this field. I mentioned it before. It really is a question of helping those who find their way to the careers. It starts with interest and engagement, accessibility to different stepping stones in order to find, and then a passion to learn. Gallup studies on engagement, I mentioned before, K through 12, college, employers want students to be engaged, because if they stay around, they don't have to re-recruit and retrain somebody new. Engagement, interest in what you're doing, and encouragement from others is really key. So the last thing I'll mention is every December we do the Maine Digital Festival, which is at the Augusta Civic Center. It's co-located with the Robotics Convention, where there's 2,500 kids from 2nd grade through high school, and we have a whole bunch of activities, and people come in and you can just see, and it's kids and their parents, it's grandparents, it's teachers. We sit them down in front of a computer with the hour of code or some other activities, and you can just see them get sucked right in, because when you see life as fun, life as a game to be played, life as something where you can succeed and thrive, that agency, when you can find something that excites you, like some of these games, I wish I had video. We see some of these kids clearly just get into the flow. I can't pronounce his name, the guy that did the research on flow in the 90s. But the idea is you become kind of, your enthusiasm becomes one with your achievement. And so this is really the most interesting thing that happens, and that is helping kids find out the way to get there. And they are going to be coming onto campuses soon, and they're going to be coming with a lot of these ways of thinking about learning as being about my learning achievement, less so about I did that class. And we're excited to be working with UMPI, who's really leading the way there. But in terms of helping students to find their way toward careers, you can't only just do it when they get to be a freshman or sophomore in college. It needs to be something that starts earlier. So if there's a way that, wow, in the wormhole, I'm in the wormhole. But if there's a way that you are reaching out to local high schools, or the way that we can make more connections in that way, we can encourage the fact that it's not just like in the 4th grade, what should I major in? You know, oh, sociology sounds kind of interesting, and it's not related to their interests. So that was what I wanted to share, and we probably only have a couple more minutes. Are there questions or things that you'd like me to look at or consider, and ways that I could help support you in what you're doing? Do you guys use Holland or any of the online things?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And I know there's a lot of different services that do it. So here's a question for you. Are there some that you find are more engaging to your students? Because I know, are there certain software or services, or even...
I'm always looking for better ones, so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have that same issue. I hear from people, it's a great concept, but they're not exciting.
The problem I run into a lot is for example, we'll do learning styles, we'll do the MBTI,
Yeah.
we'll do focus, which is based on the Holland Code.
Yes.
We'll do different assessments like that, and a lot of students won't really take them seriously because they said, oh, I did this in high school and it told me I should be a math teacher and I don't want to do that. So they'll do it again in college, or say, for example, the focus, they're not really thinking broadly about why focus suggested a midwife would be a good career for
Right.
you.
They're just seeing
the word midwife, and
Yeah.
they're like, no, I don't want to do that. They're not stepping back and saying, okay, why? What about me would make me a good midwife, you know?
Absolutely. Somebody told me they have a game they use in classes. They take, is it RIESAC or something, you know, the different strong categories. Mm-hmm. And they describe them, and they put signs up around the room, and then they have everybody go over to the area that they like, and then they have the people who share those look at the list on the wall of the kinds of attributes that are shared by people in that expertise in that area. And that starts the process of them starting to viscerally experience it more. And then there's a couple of other activities, and then after that, they give them a task that one person from each group has to do together. So they get the chance to see how they're similar to others, and then how they're very different. It's like using Myers-Briggs. But I keep thinking about that. But we, a couple of years ago, Leadership Maine, we were in a workforce development group and looked at all this and said, this is the problem. It's like, what are the tools that they can do to get started that are engaging to them? And what's the main message? It's not, you're going to be a midwife, you're going to be this. It's, you're excited about this kind of stuff, and here are a lot of possibilities, and keep your mind open to those. You don't have to decide that now. It's just pick something that's more deliberative and quantitative, or pick something else. And so we did a website and proposed this thing called Maine Sparks, where we wanted to get hundreds or thousands of Maine people to make a 1-minute video and simply say, this is what I do, this is why I love it, and this is why I do it here in Maine. And we did a prototype, and the goal was everybody was passionate about it, whether it was high paid, low paid, whether it was high status, low status, but it was right for them. And we were thinking, it'd be so cool if you could go online, and after you take that, instead of going to the 60 pages of occupational handbook on midwives, that you just saw 5 or 10 people that are involved in different kinds of helping and healthcare industries, just briefly being passionate, you know, like just, I love this. And that itself would be for like 8th graders,
or 10th graders enough. So we haven't got funding for it, but the idea is that exact problem. It's like there's not good software that helps you move in the right direction.